On paper, the Indian economy is thriving. Recent government publications report a massive GDP growth rate of 8.2%, firmly establishing India as the fastest-growing major economy in the world. But a few months after that victory lap, Prime Minister Narendra Modi stood at a rally in Hyderabad and made an unusual plea. He asked citizens to postpone foreign trips, to stop buying gold, and to voluntarily reduce their cooking oil consumption by 10% to save foreign currency. To understand why a booming nation needs to ration cooking oil, we have to look at workers like Alpesh Bhai. Alpesh moved to the diamond hub of Surat, secured a steady factory job, and finally earned enough to put his 2 daughters in an English medium private school. Then his salary was slashed in half, and he was forced to pull his kids out of that private school and send them back to the government system. Alpesh is not an isolated case here. This chart plots the government's quarterly data. You see the official GDP line steadily rising, but underneath it, informal manufacturing employment sharply plummets. In that exact period, 2.7 million workers lost their jobs. So we have a contradiction. If millions of workers are losing their jobs and facing severe pay cuts, who exactly is spending enough money to keep an 8.2% economic growth rate alive? Walk through any major Indian city right now, and the markets look prosperous. People are still buying new cars, installing air conditioners, and upgrading to the newest iPhones. The demand seems completely detached from the wage crisis. The money isn't coming from rising incomes. It is coming from personal loans and credit card EMIs. Citizens are essentially funding their daily lifestyle by borrowing cash they don't have. This data from the Reserve Bank of India shows the total share of debt carried by Indian households shot up from 36% to 41.3% of the country's total GDP. Borrowing money isn't inherently bad if it builds long-term wealth, like a mortgage. But watch how this debt breaks down. Over 55% of this borrowing is for non-housing retail loans. That means personal loans, vehicle financing, and credit card debt used to buy appliances. People are taking on this debt because they have no other choice. According to the International Labor Organization, the average inflation-adjusted salary, what a worker's paycheck can actually buy, has decreased over the last 10 years. Today, 90% of the population struggles just to fulfill their basic daily needs. Since private consumption makes up about 60% of India's GDP, the economy looks fast-growing on paper. In reality, the engine is running on expensive, unsustainable consumer debt, leaving the public with zero financial buffer. A heavily indebted population can survive, provided everything else stays perfectly stable. But over the last year, the Indian economy absorbed 3 massive geopolitical shocks. The first hit came when the United States suddenly imposed a brutal 50%.
To see the fallout, look at Tirupur, a major garment export hub in Tamil Nadu known as Dollar City. Faced with total duties of around 64% against their American competitors, orders dried up, putting an estimated 150,000 local jobs in immediate danger. The second blow hit the energy sector. Under intense diplomatic pressure from the US, India agreed to stop buying discounted Russian oil. Instead, they had to pivot to alternative sources, which required paying top dollar, literally in US currency. Right as India was forced to find new oil suppliers, the third shock arrived. The Iran war severely restricted traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. With Middle Eastern supply lines choked, global crude oil prices shot up by 58% in a matter of weeks. India imports 90% of the crude oil it consumes. When you combine lost export revenue from US tariffs with a massive sudden spike in the cost of imported oil, a country burns through its foreign exchange reserves incredibly fast. As those foreign dollar reserves drained away, the Indian rupee plummeted to an all-time low of nearly 97 against the US dollar, making it the worst-performing Asian currency of the year. When your currency weakens, everything you import becomes more expensive. The government official inflation rate sat at 3.9%, but the real impact hit the streets instantly. A standard domestic cooking gas cylinder, normally priced around 900 rupees, was suddenly selling on the black market for up to 2,500 rupees. For a poor family, that represents an inflation rate closer to 60%. The global financial markets recognized the math. Watching the currency slide and local purchasing power vanish, foreign investors panicked, pulling a staggering 2.7 trillion rupees out of the Indian market in just 6 months. A collapsed currency acts as an invisible, unavoidable tax on every citizen. It drains whatever little cash people have left, completely neutralizing the debt-fueled spending that was holding the GDP numbers up in the first place. In a severe liquidity crisis, standard economic theory dictates that the government should step in. The state is supposed to open its treasury, fund public relief projects, and artificially create jobs to keep the population afloat. But this chart shows why the Indian government is paralyzed. Since 2014, the combined debt of the central and state governments has exploded from 62 trillion rupees to over 197 trillion. This pushes the country's debt to GDP ratio, a metric comparing what a nation owes to what it produces, into a highly dangerous 82%. Zooming out to look at the state's total revenue, the treasury is virtually empty. 25% of the government's income goes immediately to paying interest on old loans. Add in state salaries, pensions, and existing subsidies, and over 80% of the money is already spoken for before a single emergency measure can be funded. You cannot build a durable economy on citizen credit cards while importing your most vital resources. With an over-leveraged public, a depreciating currency, and a state treasury drowning in its own debt, the illusion of limitless growth has run out of math.